Welcome to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Sara Gross, Ironman champion, PhD in women's history, and founder and CEO of Feisty Media. I started this show because I wanted to cut through the BS of diet culture and fitness culture and actually learn from high-achieving women at the top of their game who have figured out how to feel and perform their best at every stage of life. So I chat with experts, elite athletes, and leaders who have learned to succeed despite the massive gender data gap in exercise and medical science and product development. Every episode is filled with information, advice, and anecdotes that will help you fulfill your potential as an athlete, mom, leader, or business owner. And listen up. If you don't subscribe to our Women's Performance newsletter, you are definitely missing out. It's totally free. So head over to womensperformance.com and subscribe now. That's womensperformance.com. This podcast is a production of Feisty Media. Hey, Feisty friends. Welcome back to the Women's Performance Podcast. We are starting season 3. I am so excited to be back in the studio and recording episodes again. I hope you all enjoyed listening to Molly on the Business of Fitness podcast, which has been occupying this feed for a few weeks now. And for those who have been enjoying it, as I have, you'll be thrilled to know that that podcast now has its own feed. So head over to your podcast app and search the Business of Fitness, and you will find Molly's podcast and the great episodes. All the past episodes will be there and all the amazing episodes to come. So I'm recording today in our Feisty HQ office in Victoria, Canada, and it's a Saturday afternoon, and I expected it to be fairly quiet in here, but unfortunately there are a few people holding a rather loud meeting in the conference room next door. On top of it, we're having a windstorm, and I don't even know if I have power in my house when I go home. But all of that's to say, and we're going to talk about grace, giving ourselves grace a little bit later in the podcast. But all of that's to ask for a little bit of grace from you all up front if you hear some of those noises in the background. One of my goals for season 3 for the podcast is to bring in some new perspectives on performance, some new voices we can learn from. And so myself and my producers, Millie and Carrie, have been working hard at finding some amazing women to interview. And I'm so excited about bringing all those interviews to you in the weeks to come. And for today, and to kick off our new season, producer Millie and I chose our favorite moments from the podcast so far. Because we've been away for a while, I thought it would be really cool to recap some of the great moments and conversations I've had. So today we're going to hear from 3 world-beating athletes, a nutritionist, and a therapist, all in one episode. And of course, stay tuned until the end, because I will sort of summarize everything I feel that I learned from these incredible women. So first up, we have a clip from episode 8, which was with Amelia Boone, who is a 4-time obstacle course racing world champion. She's a 3-time winner of the World's Toughest Mudder, a Spartan race champion, and somehow manages to keep a day job at Apple as a lawyer. And I think the thing that I respect Amelia most for is how open she has been about her lifelong struggle with an eating disorder. Even the fact that she has, in recent years, checked herself into a clinic to deal with her challenges with an eating disorder. So here we pick up the conversation with Amelia, where I'm asking her kind of as a parent, but even just as a human, like what she feels the factors are that led her down that road to an eating disorder. So let's hear from Amelia.
Yeah, and I read this morning, I actually read quite a few articles about you this morning. And I read somewhere about how you sort of developed the eating disorder in high school and college, and that was a big part of why you didn't play sport. Can you tell us like a bit about that part of your life?
Yeah. So and it's funny because when people do ask me about, oh, did you play sports growing up and things like that? And I say, yeah, I did. And I was good. And then when I was a sophomore in high school, I was 15, I developed an eating disorder and I got very, very sick very quickly. And I think that at the time, people didn't really know what was going on. I had dealt with obsessive compulsive disorder as a youth. And so they are from a very young age. I think I was diagnosed when I was 7 or 8. And so they just kind of thought that maybe my fears around food were related to that. But, I was hospitalized my sophomore year of high school, and I missed an entire year of sport, really. And because I just wasn't in a position to play, I was too sick. And I think that's hard. And then when I kind of like got into a solid state or a more solid state of recovery, I kind of wanted to go back to sport, but I had just found at that point that like all the other girls had gotten so much better than me, because like I missed a key developmental phase, and it was hard for me. It was very hard for my ego to like want to go back to sport. And then to realize that time away and the damage that I had done to my body and not feeding it properly were already kind of like dampening my athletic pursuits at that point.
Yeah. I know that you've been very open about your eating disorders, and like, I feel grateful for people like you who are leaders who have talked about that stuff, because I think it's very relatable. I've seen it in our like active communities and at our Women's Summit last year too, like just people creating an open environment we can talk about that stuff, and then realizing, like to some extent, that intersection between mental health and the cultural things that we're taught about who we are as women, the things that we internalize, like a lot of us experience the same things, and the same pressures. Have you thought at all about like why, like, I know it's probably like very complicated, probably unable to answer, but like, how did you as a 15-year-old end up in that place?
That is like the $64,000 question. I think I've spent so many years trying to figure that out. And honestly, the answer for me is different than probably the 99% of people who go into eating disorder or who develop an eating disorder. I was never pressured, to lose weight. I was always a slender kid. I was always in a smaller body. I think for me, I had a very high internal perfectionistic, anxious side that then kind of used food as a coping mechanism to kind of deal with my anxiety. And so I've also like kind of dealt with some guilt around that, because I don't necessarily know why I developed it. And I it's like, I always have parents reach out to me and ask me like, okay, well, like, what can we do to stop our daughter, our son from developing an eating disorder? And I go, look, I had phenomenal parents. I didn't have diet culture in my house. They were never on diets. They were never pushing me to lose weight or anything like that. And I still developed an eating disorder. So sometimes like it just happens. You can't predict it, and you can't really feel guilty about it in some ways.
Yeah. Do you think there's any relationship to, like you said, you were 15, to like puberty and kind of your body changing quickly too?
Yeah. I don't, it could have been, I don't remember that being a conscious kind of thing. Cause I also was a late bloomer. I don't even think at that point had gone through puberty.
Right.
Or I was just, I remember, I think I got my period right when I was like 15. And so I hadn't really gone through all of the changes. But I know, it's a huge thing. And then that also, and it's a really poor time in your life to not be feeding yourself appropriately as well. Because just like the damage that it can do. So.
I thought it was super interesting when Amelia talked about how she, despite being in a supportive environment, like with her home and her family, she still developed the eating disorder as a teenager. Because I think a lot of parents sort of struggle with this one, or try to think, how do we keep our daughters and children thinking positively about themselves and their bodies. And I think for me, it kind of underlines the need to take a kind of multi-pronged approach, like we are with this podcast, to understanding issues in women's health and in health broadly, and to look at things from a variety of angles, you know, not just to focus on physiology or science or nutrition or mental health and psychology or the cultural influences, but that actually at the intersection of all of these places is where we sometimes find our most significant health challenges. So again, I just want to show my gratitude to Amelia for being so open. And if you want to hear that whole episode, it was an incredible episode. It is episode 8 on the feed, so head over there. Next up, we have Cindi Miller from episode 19. Cindi is a therapist and was a former Division I athlete and a volleyball coach. And I talked to Cindi. This is something that's really close to my heart, is literally how to stop buying into your own bullshit. The bullshit being, you know, your own bully inside your head that's telling you negative things about yourself. Like, how do we stop buying into that shit? So that's what I talked to Cindi about.
Yes. I'm wondering about this curiosity piece that you just mentioned, like the Inspector Gadget thing. Do you mean like curiosity about our own thoughts? Like why we're thinking that? Right. Interesting. So that takes the ability to be able to like separate yourself from what your thought actually is. Like, how do you help people get to that point from between like buying into your own bullshit, which is like believing the thought immediately when it comes in, and creating that gap, like, actually I can move this thought over here. I can look at it and examine it and see if I want to change my thinking in the future. How do you help people do that?
So I do kind of much like you're doing, of maybe like taking notes as I'm talking, like about
you can see my questions. Pen like waving.
I do the same thing. I make some mental notes, and at this point I tend to not write a lot because I can't focus long enough. I'll like end up writing too much, and then I'm like, wait a second, I forget what you said. But I will kind of make mental notes of things that they said, and I will start to question them. You know, so I will start that conversation of, you know, you said this. What did you mean by that? And then, you know, as they continue to work with me, what I find is, right now I have a client who, anytime we've talked about the way in which she responds to things. I'm trying to be vague to maintain confidentiality. The way she responds to things, she's recognizing it now. And so like before I can even answer, and she's like, I know, I'm doing it again. Like she's starting to separate and notice that. And it's actually really annoying at first, because you start to realize how much bombardment that like inner critic or inner monster or inner mean girl is what I have some people name their inner mean girl. And like, oh, that's Becky talking, or, oh, that's, you know, and starting to separate, like actually cognitively separate, that can be, those are two different parts of me. This is a learned behavior. The inner critic is a learned behavior. No babies come out of the womb like, oh, my knee's too fat, or, oh, my squishy belly. Like everyone, you know, like, yeah, no baby, like infant, toddler. If you talk to a toddler, they are like hot shit. Toddlers think everything is wonderful about them, and that's beautiful. And then we start to have it conditioned out. So really starting to notice that's not an inherent thing. We were taught that.
I love that. So I'm thinking like for our listeners or people who are like individually, we can offer that kindness to ourselves. So like what you said, like if one of your close friends or your counselor or whomever is asking that question, like I think with someone who's close to me just this morning, right? He had said something negative about himself, you know, yesterday. And I actually this morning went back and called him out, because I was like, that's not my experience of you. Like you said this, and that's not how, and then he's like, oh yeah, you're right. And like, we could do that for ourselves too, right? Like if we're whatever you're thinking, it's like, oh, would your bestie say that that's who you are? Like if your answer is no, or the people that love you, then, you know, then you should question those ways of thinking. So that was like a really round the way of saying that, but I was just trying to think of like something someone could do immediately if they didn't have like that counselor or someone like you in their life.
And it's very much aligned with an expert, and I would say the queen of self-compassion. Her name is Dr. Kristen Neff. She talks a lot about like, how would you speak to a friend?
Mm. As a lifelong runner and triathlete turned CrossFitter, I am stoked to announce that the athletic eyewear brand Tifosi Optics has joined us as a partner here at Feisty Media. Tifosi sports glasses hit all the marks for athletes. They're shatterproof polybicarbonate, so the lenses not only reduce glare, but also offer scratch resistance, which I 100% need. They stay in place when you are moving. The hydrophilic rubber nose pads actually get more grippy the more you sweat, so they are secure and don't slide down your face even when you're running in hot conditions. No matter what sport you do, Tifosi has shades for you. Whether you love tennis, fishing, pickleball, running, cycling, or just hanging out on the beach. They are super reasonably priced, which I love, so I can have multiple pairs that go with any outfit. And of course, Feisty listeners get a special discount. So head on over to tifosioptics.com and use the code FM20. FM as in Feisty Media to get 20% off your order. That's FM20 at tifosioptics.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Building muscle can be tough, and gains can be so slow, even for those of us who do a lot of strength training. As an ex-endurance athlete who is now in perimenopause, I know this all too well. It can be frustrating to put in the time in the gym and not see the results I'm looking for. That's why it's super important to take the right supplements at the right time. One of those supplements is essential amino acids, which are needed to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis happens when you eat high-quality protein, like eggs or whey. And by supplementing with additional essential amino acids, you can make sure you are getting the full benefit of your training sessions. Targeted essential amino acid formulas can be up to 4 times more effective than just eating protein. I've been taking amino acids for almost a year, and in combination with eating quality protein and a couple other supplements, I have managed to turn the tides on age-related muscle loss, which starts at 30 for women, by the way, and I have continued to make strength gains as I head towards 50. AminoCo has been a long-time sponsor of Feisty Media and has supported all of our brands and podcasts over the years. I recommend starting with AminoCo Perform, and you can grab some at aminoco.com/performance. If you enter the code PERFORMANCE, you will save 30% and receive a free gift if it is your first purchase. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. That's aminoco.com/performance and use the code PERFORMANCE to save 30%.
And if you wouldn't call your friend a stupid dumbass for doing, for tripping over a line in your backyard, why would you say that to yourself? Right? Because everybody else deserves grace, but I don't.
Yeah.
But when we think of like the collective, you are a part of the people too. You are a part of the collective too.
I am just such a huge fan and proponent of self-compassion and giving yourself grace. And I'll talk about it a bit later, but I think that is like the foundation to any personal journey starts there. And our next clip is from episode 12 with Holley Samuel. Some of you might remember her. Holly's a dietitian, a personal trainer, and coach. And she gave some really great, what I loved about this episode is that she gave some really great practical advice for women on how to eat as an active woman. And I just thought it was really concise and precise. So I wanted to share that.
Okay, so now, like in your work as a dietitian now, what do you see as some of the most like common challenges for active women too, or for the runners that you work with and other athletes?
I think what we just talked about, one thing that's super challenging that I see often is that like nutrition for the general public, especially through, like I just told you, like the restrictive lens in the medical field, or even like just the kind of diet culture based fitness, celebrity, appearance based field. It just doesn't apply. It doesn't apply to you if you are doing like physical activity, or if you're identifying yourself as an athlete, meaning you're going to exercise on purpose to, improve your skills in some way, no matter what level you are. It's just a lot of general nutrition recommendations out there. They may not apply to you. So when you then learn about like sports nutrition recommendations, it can become super confusing for people. Like right now, whether it's right or wrong, in the media, carbohydrates are the devil. They're terrible. They're the root of all evil. But in the sports nutrition world, they're like the foundation of everything that we teach. So, it's a lot of contradicting things like that I think are challenging, including, again, like your energy being restricted, low calorie, diet, not eating enough, going to bed hungry, a lot of those messaging in kind of a diet culture lens, like it's just going to lead to injury, hormone imbalance, and so many other problems as an athlete, as a healthy person too, but especially as an athlete.
Yeah, it's certainly when I was an elite athlete, it was in the middle of like the carbs, like the massive carbs for athletes. Like I was even told by, and to some extent I still do this, so it's not necessarily all bad or wrong, but like I was told by my nutritionist at the time to have candy like during and after exercise. I still use that one. So, but like,
Same.
And I started to eat way more carbohydrates than I naturally tended to at that time. And I started to get blood sugar problems. Like when my blood sugar would just drop off the planet, like that I had never had problems like that before. So like clearly whatever I was craving, was like kind of working like that. I needed a little bit more fats and protein, right? Then it was just like it's such an interesting time. And now it's like now it's gone like the other way. You see athletes trying to cut carbs completely out, like you said, like, and it's like that doesn't work either, because we're all just walking around like zombies and like, why are we so tired? So that didn't work. So it's like there is a lot of misinformation out there. I wanted to ask you, like, what are some things that you wish like every sort of woman who now, like you said, like who identifies as an athlete or who exercises on purpose would know about nutrition? Like what are a couple practical tips that you would give anyone?
So I think the biggest things are, as an active woman, like you need to eat within an hour of waking up. You need to probably every 2 to 4 hours after that. And you definitely need to eat all of the macronutrients. They're all important. They do different things for us. There's not one that's like better than the other. They do different things for us. So those include carbohydrates, which, turn into glucose and we eat them. And that's our brain and muscles main fuel source. Also protein, which turns into amino acids when we eat them. And that helps build our muscle tissue. And it helps us feel full because it digests really slowly. And fats, which also digest really slowly. So they help us feel full. They're involved in building our hormones up, and they can also be an energy source, but they're not the most efficient energy source compared to carbohydrates when it comes down to how they're broken down in these fancy biochemistry situations that I won't get into. But those would probably be the biggest things. Like you need to feel your body often throughout the day. You need to do it in a way that is intuitive, but there's also probably going to be some ways where it does feel a little bit forced because as you know, sport can like blunt our appetite if we're really stressed, and we are doing things that are not intuitive, like running a marathon. That's not intuitive at all. No one's just like, gee, I think I'll go run 26.2 miles today on the dot. So some of it's not going to be intuitive and it will feel a little forced, but that's okay. Just kind of give yourself some grace.
Amazing. Thank you, Holley. Eat within 1 hour of waking up. Eat every 2 to 4 hours after that. Eat all of the macronutrients, including carbs, protein, and fats. So simple, such good advice. Okay, and our next clip comes from episode 18 with Jennifer Pharr Davis. She's a hiker, author, speaker, and entrepreneur who at one time held the overall record on the Appalachian Trail, which is like a record that took 46 days to achieve. And I really, when Millie and I were talking about which episodes to go back to look for our favorite clips, I really remember talking to Jennifer because like by the end of the episode, if you haven't listened to it, we sort of start to almost have a back and forth about sharing our own struggles and helping each other. It turned into a little bit of a micro therapy session. And so I just sort of loved this conversation. How did you learn where there's like the good outcomes of that kind of grit?
So that was totally my belief. I think for most of my life is that getting to the end makes the journey worthwhile, even if it's miserable. Like if you get to the end, there's a reward there. And I definitely think that is true. And it's been true. But I do think it's shifting. And part of what I struggle with is I don't have the same drive and motivation that I used to. And that's not just for like physical challenges. And part of it, I think, is because there's too much on my plate right now. So when you feel like you can't do anything well, it makes you less motivated, and so recognizing that and in order then to refine or rediscover a drive or motivation, I'm going to have to stop doing so much. Mm-hmm. And when I was trying for my record, we had a friend helping us and I was at a really low point, and he has hiked the whole Appalachian Trail 18 times. I mean, he's like an uber endurance hiker. And I looked at him just feeling horrible. And I said, how do you know when it's time to quit? And he said, there's a difference between stopping and quitting. And he didn't explain it. And then I had like 2,000 miles to think about it. So I was like, okay, what does that mean? And what I came to is that there is a difference between stopping and quitting. And quitting is when you wish you had kept going, there's regret. But stopping is when you make a decision to step away and it's the right decision and it feels right in your heart. And so I think right now in my life, I am at the place where a lot has piled up and a lot of it's good things. So it's hard to make decisions. But I think if I can be smart and decide what I need to stop doing, then I'll be able to like regain some of that excitement and drive and motivation to do one thing or a few things really well.
Thank you, Jennifer. I just love that moment when she talks about the difference between stopping and quitting. Stopping doing something is a decision that you're making so that you can focus on the most important things in your life, versus quitting is something you would do if it gets too hard or, whatever reason. I think that that's a really, really important distinction, and we should never feel guilty about stopping. Our last clip for today is from episode 7 with the inspiring Lael Wilcox. I heard from quite a few of you about how inspiring you found Lael's story this episode, and also her talk at the Women's Performance Summit earlier in the year. Lael won the 2016 version of the Trans Am bike race outright. It's a self-supported race that goes 4,200 miles across the United States, which I can't even imagine doing a race where like you're sleeping and you're eating and everything's actually part of the race, which took her 18 days. Which is mind-blowing in and of itself, just doing it, let alone winning it. And actually, I found this clip and just Lael's general demeanor and attitude towards life so inspiring. Okay, all of these stories already. Okay, so this is 2016 when you're out there. When you got to the race, did you think, okay, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to win overall?
Oh, yeah.
Amazing.
This is ridiculous though, because I'd done one other road race in my whole life, which was a 400-mile road race that I had borrowed my mom's bike for. That was in 2014. That was like my first race. And I was like, with that one experience, I was like, oh yeah, I'm totally going to win. I'm going to win this whole thing. I'm going to beat all the men and I'm going to break the course record. I like set this up, like talk about shooting for the stars, but I was like, basically, I was like, I'm doing that.
Right.
And then I get into this race and I was like, day 5, I was like, oh my God, this is so hard. It was a heat wave. The people that were winning, there was like a man and woman that were 150 miles ahead of me. I was like, I'm such a loser. Like, I was like, well, I like suck at this. They are crushing me. Like, I'm never going to catch them. But the thing was, they were sleeping like 1 hour a night.
Right.
And I was sleeping 5. So I was losing all that time. But it's like for a race this race in the end took me 18 days. It's like they got into such a deep hole from not sleeping so early on that it was like over time I could catch them.
Right.
So I just stuck with my like agenda of like 5 hours a night, just keep going as hard as you can and then see what happens.
Yeah. And I read that story this morning about how you did eventually overtake the leading man. Do you want to tell us that? It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So then, so there were these 2 man and woman super far ahead of me. I catch the woman in like Colorado before the halfway point, which was Kansas. And then at the halfway point, the guy who was still in first, like he realized how kind of close I was getting to him and he stopped sleeping at all. Like he'd only take like cat naps because I think he was so terrified I was going to get him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I can't let this woman beat me.
Right.
But then I was just like kind of gaining on him, which even thinking about it, I'm like, I was like hunting this guy down.
Right.
Well,
like, it's a race, right?
Yeah, it's a race. Like that's fair. But you think about like the mental place we both were, it's like, ooh, that's so weird.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm gaining on him, but he's still ahead of me. And then like basically 3 days from the finish, I still had like 750 miles to go. And I was like, I have to start cutting sleep if I want to catch this guy, because there's no other way I can do it. So then I started cutting sleep. The final 3 nights, I slept a total of 6 hours. And I caught him in the last night at like 3 a.m. And I caught him. So we had both woken up to continue. He woke up and he was so out of it. He started riding the route backwards. He rode 10 miles backwards and I caught him and he turned around and started riding next to me. The thing was like, I see this guy in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. And I was like, who the hell is this? Because I'd never seen him before because he'd always been ahead of me. So I had no idea what he looked like. Yeah. And then I asked him what his name is. And he says, Stefan. And then I was like, oh my God, this is the guy I've been chasing.
Right.
Because I had no idea he went backwards. I was like, I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
As soon as he said his name, I started sprinting as fast as I could.
Which at that point, like, you're just like
3 a.m. We still have 130 miles to go. And I was like, I'm going to fucking win this race. And I just went for it. I mean, like, I was like, I was acting like when we were at the finish line. Oh my God. And then he was like catching me and then I'd ride harder. And then I took a wrong turn and he shouted, it's this way. And so then I go back, catch him. And then he's like, let's talk. We've been battling for 2 weeks. Let's finish this together. And I was like, what? Like, no way. I was like, finished with you? I've been chasing you. I've been like, I feel like I'm going to die out here. Why would I have tried so hard if we were just going to hold hands and finish? And then I was like, no way. And I took off and I dropped him and he was gone. That was it. And then I realized he's gone. I was like, oh my God. And then I was like paranoid, he's going to get me. Then my electronic shifting died again. I was like, oh dear God, he's going to get me, And so then I fix it. I shove a couple batteries down my seat tube. And then, and then I just rode to the finish, like consistently. But it's like, even that scenario, I'm sure, from being like Ironman, I was like, you're like, you have to pee. And then you're like, I was like, am I going to stop to pee? So I did. I'd be like in a field, like throw my bike down, pee, get back on my bike and go looking behind me. Like, is he coming? But in the end, I beat him by like 2 hours. He just totally dropped off. And I'm so happy to be done. I think I was more happy to be finished than to have won. I was so over it.
Yes, I believe that. I can't even imagine an 18-day race. Like that's just like I'm mind blown by that. So on behalf of womanhood, though, I would like to say, on behalf of all of womankind, thank you for not holding hands and finishing.
Oh my God. I had like people write me like messages after that. They're like, we did it.
Yeah.
That's
how I feel right now. Yeah. Like I'm somehow part of this.
People were like just shouting at their computer screen as they're watching like my little dot go across the country. Because that's the only thing they could see.
Yeah.
We just have trackers. That's it.
Isn't Lael amazing? Yay. Love her. Okay, I wrote down some key points from these clips that are going to be our take-home learns. Well, they were my take-home learns from these episodes, and I'm hoping you will also find them helpful. First of all, we have the fact that health and performance should never be looked at in a single lens, whether that's science or physiology or nutrition, psychology, philosophy or culture, whatever. You may never have a single explanation for what went wrong or what's going wrong, and also your solutions are probably going to be multi-pronged. Okay, second, your inner critic is a learned thought process. Right? And so I think that the starting point to personal growth is in fact self-compassion and grace, allowing yourself to make mistakes and letting go of those mistakes quickly. So important. And third, if we want to stay fueled properly, to keep that process of learning and growing, but also to maintain our active lifestyles, we need to fuel properly. And the simplicity with which Holley delivered that is so great. So take it with you. You need a mix of the macronutrients. Any diet that tells you shouldn't have carbs or fat or whatnot, probably not for an active woman, probably not designed for an active woman. So you need carbs, protein, and fat. You need to eat within an hour of waking up. I'm still struggling with this one. I also remember Holley told me to drink water before drinking my coffee, which I still do. And you need to eat every 2 to 4 hours. These are things, despite being so simple, that I definitely could use the reminder on. Number 4, there is a difference between stopping and quitting. Know the difference and take responsibility for your choices. And last but not least, I love this one. The main reason that people don't achieve what they want in life is because they give up too early. So first, you need to be like Lael, shoot for the stars, aim big, set your goals, make them big, make them, beyond what you can imagine. And then what's going to happen almost always is you're going to have a little bit of success. You're going to take your mom's used mountain bike or used bike, and you're going to win that race like Lael did. And then you're going to go through some hard times. You're going to think, what was her quote? She thought, I'm such a loser, in the darkest days of the 18-day race that she did across America. And then she kept going and won. And I think that's how life works a lot of the time. So thank you for listening to this first episode back of the Women's Performance Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on your podcast app. That really does help us. If you like the show, share it on the socials. Let us know why you liked it. Let us know who you would like to hear. I'm always open. So thanks all. Have a feisty week, and I'll talk to you next week. As we head into summer, rest and recovery are critical for improving sports performance, reducing stress, and living a long and healthy life. We should all invest in better sleep. So, think about the thing you lay your head on for 8 hours a night. If it's not exactly right for you, it can lead to needless tossing and turning, or worse, have you waking up with an unrelenting kink in your neck. My new Lagoon pillow has helped me improve my sleep immensely by pairing me with the performance pillow that has everything I need. So I personally was matched with the Otter pillow. Shout out to Team Otter, which I love because it has a gentle cooling effect. And I was able to choose how much stuffing I wanted in it, which is super important to me because I'm doing a decent amount of CrossFit these days and my shoulders are kind of creaky. So having a pillow that is stuffed just to the right height keeps my neck and head in exactly the right position and comfortable for the entire night. And as of fall 2023, Lagoon launched their 100% mulberry silk pillowcases. It's cool to the touch, buttery soft, and great for your skin and hair. You've got to go check out this pillowcase if you want to feel great and look great every morning. Waking up for morning workouts has never felt better. I'm refreshed and pain-free thanks to my Lagoon pillow. To check it out for yourself, go to lagoonsleep.com/performance and take the 2-minute sleep quiz to find your perfect pillow match. And then use the code PERFORMANCE for 15% off your first purchase. That's code PERFORMANCE at lagoonsleep.com/performance, whole 15% off, and the link is in the show notes. You can just click through there. For decades, running shoes have been researched, tested, and designed for men. Brands have relied on the shrink it and pink it approach to sell male shoes to female customers. That's why we are so excited to be working with Heddas. Heddas designs athletic footwear for women that elevates performance, safety, and style. Heddas unlocks the science behind women's biomechanics through dedicated research, creates better shoes for women that support their longevity and performance, and establishes new design standards to promote transparency in a male-biased industry. Heddas have a lower ankle collar to reduce rubbing, a breathable mesh toe box to allow for ventilation and to allow for female toe shape, a special kind of plate in the midsole to keep tired legs going, a narrow heel cup to reduce heel slippage and take the pressure off our Achilles, and a rounded instep to create a snug fit. Heddas has 3 shoe models designed for different sessions: the Alma Cruise for long runs, the Alma Tempo for training days, and the Alma Speed for pushing the pace. I've personally been running in the Alma Cruise and I love them. It's the shoe I always wanted and never knew I needed. The fit is perfect in every way. You can get your own pair of Heddas at heddas.com and use the code Feisty20 for 20% off. That's Feisty20 at heddas.com, and it will all be in the show notes. Endurance sports should be accessible to everyone, right? That's why we are so excited to be partnering with Motive. Motive is one of the fastest growing training apps in the world today, with thousands of amateur athletes signing up every month and a nearly perfect 4.9 star rating in the App Store. You are not a template, and your training plan should not be either. Prepare for running races, triathlons, cycling events, duathlons, or swim runs, however your season schedule shapes up, and get training written by some of the best coaches in the world in each discipline who know what it takes to help amateur athletes reach their goal on race day. The app takes the training written by those experts and then creates the most optimal training plan for your schedule, abilities, and goals. Plus, the training is fully customized to your race schedule, how much you can train each week, your current abilities, and the goals you want to achieve in your race. You can use the app for free as long as you want, or get all the upgraded features from the app for just $19.99 a month. But as a Feisty listener, you can sign up at mymotive.com and use the code Feisty for 2 months of full premium access. That's right, you get 2 months of premium for free. So you quite literally have nothing to lose. So head over to mymotive.com, MYMOTTIV.com, and use the code Feisty, FEISTY. And on a personal note, I know the founder of Motive, and he is driven to make triathlon and all endurance sports more accessible for the athletes who care about their performance but who aren't quite ready for a full-time personal coach. If that sounds like you, definitely try the app for 2 months for free. You literally have nothing to lose.